Action.
So, real quick, should I start with? Okay, start. Can you start again, or you just cut it and it doesn't matter? Okay. All right. Welcome. No. Welcome to Rise Above. I really wanted to start this project to give hope and carry a message that there is a way out from I don't want to focus on substance abuse because I feel like so many people would be judgmental of it, even though it's a lot of people's stories. In a lot of people's stories. All right. So I grew up in Ventura, California. I was originally born in Colorado Springs and moved out to beautiful Ventura when I was 3 years old. I have no memories of. No, hold on, let me start again. Fuck, why the fuck is the camera? Alright. Alright. My name's Dustin. I grew up in Ventura, California. I had two loving parents, very hardworking in a middle class family. My father worked construction ever since I can remember, and my mother ran a chiropractic office and was a massage therapist. I was raised with values, morals, a wonderful older sister who always made me look bad. She always got straight A's in school, always did what she was told. And when I got into school at a young age, I constantly rebelled. I constantly felt like rules were meant to be broken. I constantly was running from problems, and to describe it very easily, I was a chameleon. I could fit into any crowd, whether it was a surfing crowd, whether it was a skateboarding crowd, and I started playing sports at a young age. I can remember my grandfather taking me to a tennis club in Camarillo at a very young age so I could play tennis after school. Although I was very talented at tennis, I had a gift for the sport. I always wondered what my friends were doing at the beach. They were having bonfires at the beach, they were chasing girls, they were trying different substances, experimentation basically. So when I was 12 years old, I smoked pot for the first time and loved the way it made me feel. I felt like my emotional side was numb, and it made me feel very comfortable in my own skin. As I went to high school, I started getting into a little bit more trouble. I started to rebel more. When I was 15 years old, I can remember walking up to my mom and telling her that I needed to leave Ventura. I was getting into a lot of trouble. I was seeing the principal a lot, not getting good grades. So she set up a plan for me to go to Australia and live with my uncle. So I packed up my stuff, flew to Australia, lived in Byron Bay, Australia, and really learned how to surf and met a completely different culture of kids that welcomed me. And I was the only American kid at a school in Byron Bay. There was about 600 kids, and I can remember getting up in front of the class one of the days I was first there, maybe my second or third day. I got there and I did a math problem, and all the kids were taken back by my voice. My accent apparently was very thick to them. When the class was over, they all came up to me and said, "Where are you from?" LA, Hollywood, and started rattling off actors' names if I had met Brad Pitt and other people, and I just laughed and thought it was super comical. Anyways, I learned how to surf over there. I started going to concerts, and I started to party a lot more. School kind of fell by the wayside there, and I basically just surfed, ran around with friends, chased girls. Had to come back after a year because my student visa ran up, and I came back to Ventura and did not want to go back to school. Completely fought the idea and that's when my partying phase really took off. My friend was in Costa Rica at the time, and he had contacted me from San Jose, Costa Rica, and he said, "You got to come down here. The surf is really good down here." So I worked a little bit of construction with my father, with a friend of mine. We made enough money, and we bought a plane ticket and packed 4 surfboards, a backpacking bag, and off to Costa Rica I went at 18 years old. We get to Costa Rica, the surf was really good. My friend was clearly unhealthy and doing a lot of cocaine in Costa Rica, and he told us that we need to go to a spot in Costa Rica where it's one of the longest left point breaks in the world. So we backpack eating empanadas and hitchhiking all the way down to the South Point in Costa Rica. Stayed there for 2 months. The surf was really good when we got there, and then we waited for another swell. In between being in the ocean, we were doing cocaine all night long, jumping off bridges into crocodile infested waters, not knowing what we were doing. We were young and dumb, trying to look for adventure. I've always been adventure seeking. I've always been an adrenaline junkie, always looking for that next high. And so when I first started using substances, and as it progressed to harder drugs, I loved that feeling, and I kept chasing it. And I feel like I didn't realize that an addiction within myself was building, and I crossed an invisible line at a certain point in my life where I couldn't stop using drugs. And at that age, so when I came back from Costa Rica, I continued to experiment. I got to 21 years old, started going to bars, to clubs, going to LA, going to Santa Barbara. I would always be the driver, drinking beers and alcohol while I was driving, and doing other substances while I was driving. Luckily, never got in a car accident. Luckily, never hurt anybody, thank God. And so that phase of my life started. I also went to Ventura College in 2004, locally here where I grew up, and I played tennis and did really well and excelled on the team. And I also partied a lot because I always had that double life where friends were playing tennis very seriously, staying healthy, training, working out, and I always constantly wondered in the back of my mind, what were my friends doing at the beach? What were they doing going out at the bars? And I got consumed with that lifestyle. I managed to play tennis very seriously. I trained for about 12 months and then traveled to Venezuela. I went to the capital, Caracas in Venezuela, and a couple other guys that I knew. We went and played a couple amateur pro tennis tournaments. I was playing really good tennis at the time. Like I said, I trained a lot before that. I was in really good shape, and telling the story now and looking back, I know that I had an addictive personality because I get to Venezuela, I had a match lined up for the next morning, we got settled into our hotel room, we went out and had some drinks at like a reggaeton club outside venue, and somebody offered me cocaine in the bathroom, and after I had had a few drinks, I thought that was a good idea. And I ended up doing coke all night long and not being able to perform on the tennis court. Tanked the match, didn't play well, and came back from Venezuela. I also traveled to other countries, but I came back from traveling playing tennis, and I played a local tennis tournament here in Ventura. Injured my back. I was 25 years old at that time. Injured my back and went to a pain management doctor, and that doctor prescribed me extremely addictive narcotics. He also prescribed me anti-anxiety medication. To this day, I don't know why he insisted on me taking anxiety medication. And he also gave me muscle relaxers that were very addicting. And from that day on, once I started to take the medication, I became physically dependent. I could not get through 5 hours without having to take another tablet from the prescription bottle, and justifying it in my head at the time, thinking that it was okay. It was prescribed by a professional, by a clinical, doctor, somebody that clearly knew what they were prescribing me more than, and had more knowledge than I did. And I did that for about 15, 16 months. I can remember taking that every single day, living with a partner at the time, and I remember running out of the medication and thinking I had one day in between the medicine that I had been prescribed. I woke up at my house the next morning with no medication left and was in a full-blown panic, not realizing, I felt like I had the flu, riddled with anxiety. And that's the way I can describe it. I reached out to a friend of mine who wasn't a good influence, but it was somebody that I knew that lived close by, and I knew he had more knowledge about substance issues. I knew he had done his thing in the past. So I contacted him and asked him, hey, I'm out of my medication. I feel extremely sick. I think I have the flu. What's wrong with me? And he said, no, you're withdrawing. A lot of people call it dope sick. And I was like, at first thinking, no, that's not me. I've only been taking this medicine that's been prescribed to me by a doctor for X amount of time. How can I be completely runny nose, fever, sweats, complete panic mode? And so he came over, he said, well, here, I'll come help you. He showed up about 30 minutes later and introduced heroin to me. I didn't know what it was at first. I just remember him coming over, standing in the living room with a shady demeanor, even though he was a friend of mine, but he was, addicted at the time, and most people that are addicted to substances aren't trustworthy. And he pulled out foil from his pocket. He had like a little pen that he had taken apart to use as like a straw. A lot of people call them tutors. And he took a hit, and I just remember seeing like a black substance run down the foil as he was smoking it, and it reeked of vinegar. And he said, well, this will make you feel better. I asked him what it was. He told me it was heroin. I was immediately terrified because I had heard of rock stars, musicians, athletes growing up, and that they would get addicted to strong opioids. And heroin seemed at the time like the strongest one. And I felt like nobody could stop using that, and ultimately you would die of an overdose, and you just wouldn't live a long, healthy life, and your life would be cut short, unfortunately, due to that substance. So I was very, very scared, very hesitant, yet the physical withdrawal that I was going through made me do anything, and I wanted to just feel better. I didn't want to sweat. I didn't want to have so much anxiety. I didn't want to be panicking anymore, so I tried smoking it, and my body rejected smoking it. I'm not sure what it was. Maybe the cut that they put in the drug. I really don't know to this day. I've never been able to smoke it when I experimented with it and was addicted. So his alternative idea was to inject it, and that scared me even more. Yet, like I said, I wanted the panic, anxiety alleviated from my body, from my mind. I felt like my head was like a pressure cooker, and it was about to explode unless I did something to calm that pain. So he injected it for me the first time, and from that moment, it was such a euphoric feeling. It was like, I always tell people, I can describe it as a warm blanket being put over you in bed, and you can feel it from your toes all the way to the top of your head. It's the most euphoric feeling, and looking back now, I can understand why people get so addicted to it, and it grips them so much, and it is so hard to overcome because the feeling is so great. It's orgasmic, the way that you feel. So from that day on, I was completely addicted and fixated on the process of using needles, of injecting. And my addictive mindset, like I mentioned, I've always had. I'm an adrenaline junkie. I always like to be adventurous. So I started using needles for other substances, multiple different substances. The list goes on and on. And I started looking into it, and well, it's the best way. It goes in your bloodstream, right? So any drug you do like that, you must have the strongest effects. You must feel the full effects. And so I was addicted to doing that for multiple years. I first attempted to get clean and get off the drugs because I knew it had become a problem. I had moved my partner out of our house at the time. She moved back to Texas. I was in and out of jail, picking up petty thefts, possession of a controlled substance, being put on probation. And that, at around 27, that's when I started becoming part of the system. And I knew my life had become out of control. Things had started to skyrocket. I went to a detox in Santa Barbara, and I stayed there for 14 days. They took me up. I took myself off of heroin, at least I attempted to at the time, and was prescribed Suboxone, which is an opioid crutch to help for the withdrawals and the dependency when you are not taking a hard opiate anymore. I lasted there 14 days with the attempt mindset to change my life, to get everything back on track. And I did really well for the 14 days, yet I was addicted to Suboxone when I left, and that substance is extremely hard to get off of as well. Left detox and fell right back into old patterns. I didn't change the people that I hung out with. I didn't change my friends. I didn't change my surroundings. And I fell right back into that behavior, going out, going to clubs, going to bars. And then the nightlife kind of subsided, and the stronger drugs really took over, where I was working, but I would call in sick all the time because there were some mornings where I would wake up and I wouldn't have that drug that I needed to get me through the day. And that led to loss of jobs, reputation being damaged. So my thinking was, well, I have a friend that lives in Hawaii, pack my bags and take off. I've always been a runner from situations, problems that arise, and I packed my bags. I called a friend of mine when I was coming back from Las Vegas on like a 4-day gambling, partying weekend. Felt horrible, so hungover. Called my best friend at the time and said, I need to get out of California. My life is out of control. I don't know what to do. I've had good opportunities, and I just can't seem to stay consistent with any of them. So he bought me a one-way plane ticket, got back to Ventura, packed my bags, and left the next day with no idea. I had never been to Hawaii before, maybe as a little kid. Yeah, I went as a little kid to Oahu. Don't really remember much. Waikiki, most people go to Honolulu. So he was living on the big island of Hawaii on Kona side. Flies me out there, I get there, and I learned now that no matter where I went, there I was, and my mindset was the same. My addictive personality was the same. Finding opiates out there wasn't possible, which was great. I found other drugs. I found meth. I found drinking in the bars. I found mushrooms. So I was teaching tennis at the Waikoloa Hilton Resort on the Big Island of Hawaii, while trying to manage paying rent, working. I was eating mushrooms, I was going camping, I was doing a ton of cocaine, and then I got addicted to ice, they call it out there, which is methamphetamine. And that was extremely devastating to my body physically at the time. Things spiraled out of control very fast over there. Burned bridges, reputation was shattered. Basically left the island coming back to the mainland because Life had really caught up with me. I was in my 30s at that time. I started to really feel the effects from substance abuse. My mental state was not good at the time, and so I came back to Ventura, California, where I grew up, and attempted to get healthy again. And then from years on, from about 32 to 39, I willingly went to multiple treatment centers, was off and on a probation, and I am 42 now, just turned 42, and 8 months ago, I was, to give you a picture of how rock bottom addiction and substance abuse, where it led me. 8 months ago, I was living in my 4Runner. I had a puppy that I was trying my hardest to take care of. I was isolating. I was not willing to be around anybody because I didn't trust anybody, because the people I was surrounding myself with were shady, were lying, were stealing, were cheating. I was going to hotels where someone was always in the room selling drugs all night long. Someone was standing next to the door with their gun on their hip, watching the door, completely nodding off as if they were a security employee, and they weren't obviously they were completely falling asleep all night long. And I was completely desperate. I was desperate. My life was in shambles, and I reached out for help. So the morning, it was a really, really cold morning. I can remember the wind blowing so hard to where it was literally rocking my 4Runner back and forth. My puppy was unhappy. It was breaking my heart. The police were called for a wellness check to another car, an acquaintance, I wouldn't even call it a friend, an acquaintance of mine that would park in his truck and use drugs all day and all night. That's literally all that person would do. My desperation, thank God I got that desperate. I walked up, I saw the cops pull up. There were probably 3 or 4. I get out of my 4Runner, I walk up to him, and I was extremely unhealthy. I was withdrawing that morning. I had ran out of drugs, and I really had just given up the fight. Like, I didn't want to live like that anymore. I didn't want to. I knew that I was a good person. I knew I had a good heart. I had just been completely consumed and taken over by drugs for so long. So I walk up to the police officer and I asked him for help. And as I asked him for help, I was so malnourished and dehydrated, and I hadn't eaten in probably 2 days. I probably hadn't drinking water in a day and a half. I didn't care anymore. I asked for help and I collapsed. And he called the ambulance and he said, "Do you need detox?" And I said, "Yeah, I need help." So I was able to place my animal somewhere, thank God, to family friends who are taking care of him to this day. That was probably one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do, is let a dog go. Go to detox, and shout out to VCMC, because they have turned the 3rd floor of their hospital, which are the old rooms that they used to use before they remodeled, they completely dedicated it and flew in doctors from around the world that would study abroad to medically detox people that were struggling, suffering from substance abuse. It's an amazing thing that they do, and I think a lot of people don't know about that place exists. So I go there. I was medically detoxed. I was given strong narcotics to come off of the stronger narcotics I was on. I didn't mention, but in my 4Runner, I was addicted to fentanyl. It's a complete worldwide epidemic right now. It's readily available. It's devastating lives, and I could not find heroin anymore, so I switched to fentanyl, like a lot of people do. Stronger, you don't have to use as much, you get the high faster. And so that's what I was detoxing from the hospital, was from fentanyl and other substances. I can remember getting up to go to the bathroom and completely hallucinating, auditory hallucinations as well as visual hallucinations. collapsing in the bathroom, waking up to 6 nurses around me saying, "We saved your life, you have one more chance." I made it through that. The doctor said I was stoic, not experiencing so much pain, but not expressing any emotion. And I got through that. I really, really wanted to change my life. And at that moment, I was willing to do anything it took. Anything. Somebody could have told me to run across the freeway and try and dodge cars, and if it would help me stay healthy and change my life, I was willing to do it. I like to call it like a gift of desperation. A lot of people that struggle with addiction and are in the grips, I feel like if it doesn't come from within, and if you truly don't want to change your life, the drugs are so baffling and so powerful, they will continue. It's like having a gorilla on your back. It is very hard to get that gorilla off. But at that time, I was willing to do anything to better my life, anything to get my health back. I left that medical detox and I placed myself straight into a house where there's a handful of other guys that are sober, that are getting their lives back on track, and I completely dedicated my life to health, fitness, getting back on the tennis court, playing tennis again, staying extremely healthy, and life has gotten so much better over the 8 months. And I know that doesn't sound like a long time, although I feel like anybody that can stay clean for one day is a miracle, if that makes sense, because being in the grips of addiction is so hard to get away from. You have to change everything. You have to change people that you hang out with. You have to change places that you go to. You have to change the things that you do. And since then, my life has gotten so much better. It's been flourishing ever since. I have wonderful friends in my life. I have reconnected with family who I lost connection with for a long time when I was in my addiction. I wouldn't associate myself with my family because I didn't want to see me unhealthy. I have gotten back to work. I have 2 jobs right now. And I really wanted to start this project to show and express that there is a way out. And if you are struggling with addiction, I will provide resources for medical detox. Like I said, a lot of people don't know that exists. Sometimes you just have to get medically detoxed in order for the fog to lift and for the brain to rewire itself. I know it's a process, and I will forever be in the process of life, constantly growing as a person. So I will provide resources. If you are struggling, please comment below. I have a list of treatment centers loved ones, family members can go to. And yeah, there is a way out, and it is possible to live a healthy, successful life without any dependency, whether it's overeating, whether it's gambling, whether it's shopping, whether it's sugar. There is an answer and there is a solution. And I feel like as long as I stay vigilant and motivated and driven, sky's the limit. I do feel like the world is our oyster and we can do whatever we want as long as we set our minds to it. So thank you for listening to my story, and don't forget to rise above. That is some serious rambling.